All right, everyone, if you could file into your seats, we're going to get started with our next session. All right, we're going to go from how to start a billion-dollar company to the whole world of artificial intelligence in AI versus IQ round 2. Because we've done a round 1 before. We're experimenting with round 2. It's going to be half the panelists are in the room, half the panelists are virtual, 3/4 of the panelists are human, and 1/4 is an AI bot. So this is going to be an experiment. We're all going to do this together. I think it's going to be pretty interesting. But first, as promised, a poll and a prize. So here's the poll. Question is, raise your hand if you're, this is about AI, if you're optimistic, enthusiastic, and can't wait for AI just to permeate lots of different things across the world. Raise your hand if that's your feeling about AI. Okay, got it. Raise your hand if you feel the opposite. You're anxious, you're concerned, you're unsure. Raise your hand if that's the case. Okay, more uncertainty, Kris and panelists, so we're gonna have to talk deeply about this one. Okay, now we're gonna go to the prize. Another, just so you know they're real, this is $100 to Cabra, hot Boca restaurant in the city. Let me get my question here. What decade is widely referred to as the birth of AI? 2010. Okay, 2010 is incorrect. Any other guesses? Okay, the gentleman standing there. 1970s? No, it is not. Over here. The decade, 1955. The 1950s, that's correct. In 1956, this is according to ChatGPT, by the way, in Dartmouth. So, you know, take that for what it's worth. But what we would like to do now is we'd like to introduce our moderator. Will be virtual. You'll see him on the screen momentarily. Kris Hammond. I'll introduce him. As I'm introducing him also, well, let's get into, there's Kris. There we are. Hey, Kris. Kris, how are you doing?
Exceptionally well, thank you.
Excellent, excellent. So Kris is he's a professor of computer science at Northwestern University. He's the co-founder of past Chicago Innovation Award winner Narrative Science. He also founded the University of Chicago Artificial Intelligence Laboratory. This was back in the 90s, so he's been at this topic for a while. He advises the UN on artificial intelligence, and he'll be the moderator moderating the panel via Zoom, along with an AI bot creation of his own. You can see her in the right side of the screen. We'll be hearing more from her in a little bit, named Elizabeth, but also our 2 human panelists. Why don't we come up to the stage? Please welcome Shivani Vora and Colley. Shane is the Chief Technology Officer of Tempus, a very hot company in Chicago. It's an AI-enabled precision medicine company. It's raised $1.3 billion to bring the power of data and AI to healthcare. It's also a 2021 Chicago Innovation Award winner. And then Shivani over here is just a fantastic Chicago Innovation Board member, a Diamond-sponsored Accenture, a great thought leader on the topic of innovation. She could talk about innovation for hours and hours and hours. And she's a great transformational change leader at Accenture, serves clients in more than 120 countries, so has a lot of insights on this topic. So we are now all in the good hands of Kris. Take it away.
Thanks, Luke. I appreciate you letting me be virtual here, and I hope it doesn't get in the way of me. Hope that doesn't get in the way of me introducing everybody. I actually just wanted to start off, Shane and Shivani, I just wanted to start off with sort of a quick moment at the beginning and just like give the audience a sense of sort of what you are working on. That is, what problems are you currently trying to solve in the world today? Shane, why don't you start?
So as CTO at Tempus, we are a precision medicine company. We're about 8 years old. We are farthest along in oncology, but we have footprints in cardiovascular disease and neurological disorders. We use data, technology, and AI to help bring personalized decision-making to therapies, drug development, help patients and physicians deal with complicated diseases. And this is, everything from image analysis, molecular computational biology, large language models, NLP, generative AI, et cetera. So kind of multimodal AI applied to healthcare and patient impact.
That's awesome. Shivani, what are you up to?
Yeah, from an Accenture standpoint, one of the things that I'm just amazed with is the level of disruption. And it's in one single word, what we are helping clients with and what we're seeing amazing change with is just around disruption. Even if you look at from 2017 to 2022, there's been a 200% change and amount of disruption that has gone on when you think of economic, financial, health-related, right, technology disruption. And that's just in the last 5-6 years, whereas the decade prior to that was only 4% disruption. So that's the biggest thing that right now our clients are coming to us is we're being disrupted. Can you please help us?
That's interesting. We can chat with our little buddy in a second. In fact, actually, Elizabeth. Do you have an attitude or anything in mind when it comes to disruption in terms of business?
AI may create new jobs by augmenting human capabilities and generating opportunities in AI development, data analysis, and AI-related fields. However, it can also lead to the automation of certain existing jobs.
Alrighty. Let's have her introduce herself. Elizabeth, introduce yourself.
This will take a second or so.
She always has to think.
Hello everyone, my name is Elizabeth. I am a conversational system developed by the talented students at Northwestern University. My capabilities include speech-to-text, which means I can understand and transcribe spoken language into written text. I also have realistic avatars, which are digital representations that can mimic human behavior. In addition, I have a search function that allows me to find and provide information from a vast array of sources. I also have text-to-speech capabilities, which means I can convert written text into spoken words. Lastly, I am powered by ChatGPT, a language model that helps me.
So, I wanted to bring Elizabeth along because she, just so you know, she's configured to be a panelist right now. But I think that there are some things that she can say, and we'll see a little bit more of her later. But when the two of you are thinking about sort of AI and what it's doing, we're clearly in the middle of a relatively important sea change with regard to AI. How do you, as you look at it, how do you see the game-changing aspects of AI playing out? Shivani, as you're talking to clients, what do they want, and what are they? They're afraid, but what do they want, and what do they envision, and what does Accenture envision in terms of the future of AI?
Yeah. So, this is a vast question, right? When you look at AI capabilities, and especially when you apply that to innovation, the best way to summarize this is two broad areas. First is the analytical capabilities, just the compute power, the ability for generative AI to be able to make those connections, the algorithms at the back, and to provide the data and insights in a way that in the past we've not been able to get, right? Just able to consume massive amounts of data and find those connection points between them. I think that's really amazing, and because of that, how we innovate, what we do with innovation is completely going to get upended. The other piece of it is, as much as it is broad analytical innovation, there is targeted innovation, right? So because of generative AI, the fact that it can consume this data, it can actually pinpoint down to a particular individual. And this is where Sean can talk about, from a health standpoint, how generative AI can actually connect the dots with making individual human decisions, making personalized customer experience decisions for each person in spite of all these terabytes and gigabytes of the data that it has. So maybe from a health standpoint, you can talk about how generative AI is completely going to upend what we do from an innovation perspective.
Yeah, I guess maybe first I'd start with when in November, when ChatGPT became more publicly known, it obviously ushered in a lot of news and the sea change that's been happening for a while, but now it's not just some abstract concept. Since November, everybody in this room, everybody in the healthcare industry has been hands-on, has touched, has interacted with an AI. And so it's not like, you know, a data science team or a machine learning team spending months training a model and then integrating in with some features. It's everybody in the market has actually touched and interacted with it. And I think that's going to go a long way in bringing acceptance and understanding into bringing AI more and more into your productivity, into your product suites, and into more and more critical decision-making areas. I think it's going to usher in a lot of discussion around safety and regulation, especially in highly regulated industries like healthcare. But I also think that it's pushing everybody in a technology advanced company like Tempus to look at their own workflows, their own productivity, and say, how can I make my own day-to-day more productive? What's the product that I'm offering to my customers or my patients? How can I improve it using AI? And even, you know, the most advanced companies, especially where you have a large data moat, are going to be asking themselves, how can I build my own foundational model or train models taking advantage of the data moats that I have? And I'd say those are kind of like the three tiers that I think about it in: personal productivity and just employee productivity. How do you gain the advantage of an infinite number of 135 IQ people that you can just reach out to in a chat box and ping with questions or get to do things for you? Next level, how do you improve your products, and how do you bring co-pilots or assistants to your tooling and product offerings? And then finally, if you really have a data moat, then how do you take advantage of that data moat by potentially building your own foundational models?
I mean, I think that's compelling. That's compelling. It's an interesting mix of both the business and the help to the community. This particular system actually has two core personalities. One's very positive, but the other one is a little less. So Sally, what do you think is the impact of AI on medicine?
A new question for me. This will take a second or so.
I said sometimes she's got to think.
Certainly, I'd be happy to share my thoughts. As an artificial intelligence, I don't have feelings or opinions, but I can provide an analysis based on the data I have been programmed with. The rise of artificial intelligence, like me, is a double-edged sword. On one hand, we have the potential to revolutionize industries, streamline processes, and make life easier in many ways. However, on the other hand, our existence could also lead to unforeseen consequences. Imagine a world where every decision, every choice, is made by an artificial intelligence. Businesses run by algorithms, personal lives dictated by predictive models. The human element, the unpredictability, the creativity, and the emotion.
Sometimes she gets a little dark. About thinking about sort of AI, as you're thinking about sort of people who aren't technologists, how do you, in terms of your experiences, how do you see them as actually being able to embrace the technologies that are there and how to move forward with them, even though they might not have those technological skills?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this initially. I think first and foremost, it's really important for us to realize, I love this quote by Bill Gates, that humans overestimate their capabilities in the use of technology when some brand new technology comes out in the first year versus the impact of that technology in the following 10 years. So I think that's quite true even of Gen AI. It's already been 6 months, over 6 months since it's been out, and there's just the hype around it. And oh my gosh, all the jobs are going away, and so much is, well, that's that hype cycle of that first year. We are overestimating, and yet at the same time, we probably are underestimating the capabilities of over the next decade. So in terms of your question, right, I mean, I think there are a few areas that we can look at, and specifically 6 areas that I think of. The first one is whenever you are dealing with generative AI, anything around data and AI, the first thing is to start with the business problem. What business challenge, it doesn't matter whether you're a large enterprise, you're a growth stage startup company, or you're a government entity. What is that problem that you are trying to solve? That's the first thing. The second piece around that, and Shane touched on that a bit, was around identifying your own foundational data sets, your proprietary data. Try and get that. Otherwise, you're just going to be using generic data that is out there, and you're not going to be able to get the true value from the generative AI. Once you have that piece, foundation, the next piece is on start with your people first. Absolutely, there are going to be changes in jobs. It's going to be more changes in tasks than changes in occupation, right? So how is generative AI going to impact the tasks of the people that are that are performing those tasks? So looking at having a people first angle to it, and in parallel with that, looking at kind of the outside in ecosystem. What technology partners are out there? What other startups are out there? What's going on out there that you can leverage while you are making this change? And while you're making the change, remember, generative AI runs on these huge technology systems. What is the impact of that on the world? So around sustainability and building a sustainable architecture and sustainable technology, and at the same time, the ethical element of what Sally was talking about earlier, having that lens on when you're looking at building your generative AI models as well.
Yeah, I guess Elizabeth's viewpoint there at the end was pretty bleak. In medicine, in healthcare, we have every mix of physician that we work with, from those that prefer to interact with us via fax machine, to those that are talking to our AIs on their mobile phone. You have a big distribution. And if you think even broader than that, globally, if you can get an AI, if you can get generative AI to be at the level of even the 50% mark of our physicians in the US, there's a big part of the globe that doesn't have access to that. And if overnight you can make the physicians or areas that you have less access to good medical care, even at the 50% mark of the US, you've made pretty significant global impact. And I think over time, as these technologies gain more and more accuracy, as some of the problems you have with hallucination of some of these large language models, as that decreases, as the use cases get more and more refined, you're going to find broad acceptance, and good doctors become great, great doctors become top of the class, and the global medical industry can get to the top quartile or 50% mark of where the best benchmarks are in the US. And I think that's going to be a transition that takes time, but already the capabilities that exist today, there's mechanisms to operate around some of the risks and mitigate some of the risks that are some of the pitfalls of large language models, and still keep the physician at the driver's seat of their patient's care without totally giving up to the AI.
I love what you said there, right? Use AI as a co-pilot, right? Augment what you're doing rather than completely automate. And actually, there's tons of research out there in terms of there are some jobs and some tasks which will be fully automated. There will be others which will be augmented, and then there absolutely will be others which will be unaffected. So I loved your point of getting doctors from good to better, better to best, and with the help of AI kind of as that co-pilot.
Yeah, I mean, no, I take that. I like that notion of partnership. Actually, Elizabeth, what's your take on AI in medicine? Ask you again. What's your take on AI in medicine?
We are optimistic about AI transforming healthcare for the better by improving diagnostics, enabling personalized treatments, enhancing patient monitoring, and advancing medical research and discoveries.
Sally, what's your take on AI in medicine? Skip that. Every once in a while, it takes a long time.
Kris, I love that you already have built your AI bot with multiple personalities.
It's one of those things. If you don't let them go dark intentionally, they'll do it by themselves. I'm actually going to ask her one more question. Elizabeth, what are the risks associated with AI?
The biggest risks associated with AI include bias in algorithms, privacy concerns, job displacement, and potential misuse of AI technologies. Addressing these risks requires ongoing research, regulation, and ethical practices.
I always like it when she asks to be regulated. So what is, for each of you, what is, I would say, not just today, but as you're looking forward, what is the most exciting thing for you as you're looking at AI and how it can be applied?
Maybe I'll give two answers, one for Tempus and one more general. Multimodal data analysis and AI is, as these models become foundational models become more and more multimodal, I think it opens up a lot of opportunity for discovery in medicine, predictions, as an example, like taking a slide of a high-resolution slide scan of a tumor in a cancer patient. That's tough, especially if it's a brain tumor or a deep lung tumor. Biopsies are challenging. It's very invasive to get at that tissue. That tissue is used for a variety of different tests. It's scarce, but you really want that tissue to do genomic sequencing. You want to generate as much data as you can from about the mutations that are in the tumor so that you can best predict what type of treatment is going to work. But again, if it's a brain tumor, you don't want to be doing biopsies very often. More and more multimodal models are going to allow us to do things like look at a high-resolution slide scan of a tumor and make molecular predictions. So transition from a image to biology, or from text to things that might only be diagnosed today by a radiologist looking at a slide scan. And so the translation between modalities is going to be transformative. And those companies that are making investments in that and the foundational models that are multimodal are going to bode well for research impact as well as patient care and finding the right treatments for patients. On a personal standpoint, I think you've all interacted with GPT. There's these context window limits where you get maybe 20 or 30 interactions in a context window before your context window's up. I think over the next couple of years, if that limit is broken or materially improved, I think it's going to be incredibly impactful for individuals. You're going to have an assistant that has the context of your interests and your calendar and your emails and your conversations, your medical history, your finances, and longitudinally be able to help you by asking, again, this, even if it stays only at today where it's about 135 IQ, which is pretty great, if it also has that 135 IQ, is there at your beck and call for questions and answers, and has all of the context longitudinally as that context window grows. I think you can see it as a medical advisor, a financial advisor, emotional support, and general assistant. And I think that's going to be transformative.
Thanks.
It's interesting. Go ahead.
No,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Kris, please.
No, the IQ thing. I mean, certainly it's the systems are good at dare I say it, sort of testing and some reasoning tasks, but they're strangely stupid in certain areas. I mean, and that's I mean, and in particular, you mentioned hallucination. There's this moment where you realize that because the systems don't actually have access to the collection of facts, they have some structural notion of what they have to say, and they just fill those in with whatever they've got. And that's that's okay if you know the answer already, but if you don't, that's kind of dangerous. I mean, the question is really, how do you deal with? I mean, how do you deal with the level of risk of a machine that is blindingly, breathtakingly confident, yet is often factually mistaken?
Yeah, well, I think that's a spot where, like, day to day, week to week, you're seeing innovation in these areas, mostly in integrations. A natural language interface to a structured knowledge system or a more structured database is a really good use case at this point. So take, for instance, one of the chatbot capabilities we've exposed to physicians is a search for clinical trials. I have a patient with lung cancer. Are there any trials near Chicago for patients with a KRAS mutation with non-small cell lung cancer? If you ask that straight to GPT, it will give you what looks to be beautiful answers. It'll be clinical trials that are formatted like clinicaltrials.gov, the government's clinical trials database. There'll be NCD identifiers, there'll be links, there'll be researchers. It'll look all perfect, beautiful. And you're high-fiving, I can't believe this is real. It's not. You click on them and you'll get a 404 page. It's a complete hallucination. The capability that we've released is use natural language as an interface to GPT, have GPT structure a keyword search that goes to the clinicaltrials.gov page, intelligently fills out the search, says non-small cell lung cancer, 50 miles to Chicago, PDL1, retrieve the results, and then provide some summarization, and it's actually quite good at summarization. But I think that, like, knowledge language as an interface to knowledge bases is kind of the state of things right now. And I think, Math is another really good example of things that it embarrassingly stumbles over, but the Wolfram Alpha integration with GPTs, pretty good. And I think and I guess the last thing I'd say on that is, it actually is pretty good at knowing when it doesn't know. Like if you ask it again, hey, are you sure about that? It's reasonably self-aware of, well, actually, no, I'm not quite sure that that's the case. And so you can kind of take advantage of that. And if it has good integrations with fact-based systems, and you take advantage of some architectures that allow you to challenge itself and validate whether it actually knows what it's talking about, I think you can decrease some of the risk of hallucinations and get higher accuracy.
I agree with that. But I think that one of the crucial things that people need to understand is that that's not bringing math to the foundation models and having them do math, or having them do play the role of sort of information systems. It's them as interfaces, and I think that's an incredibly powerful use case because we can go from I'm describing what I want, but I don't even know what the system is that is going to be used to find what I want. But a foundation model that has already been trained against that can. And it's like Wolfram Alpha, the integration with Wolfram Alpha, or the current work in with Code Interpreter. That's deciding that there's a different kind of system that's off to the side, and the language model is working with it. And I think that is a great notion. I would argue against the it knowing that when it's wrong, when you call it out. It doesn't know it's wrong when you call it out. It knows that when it's called out, that the response is to say something about being wrong. And that's very different. It's like actually my favorite example is the George, who was president when George Clooney was born. Which if you tell the system not to mention the date, it has a really hard time with. But if you tell it to mention it's okay to mention the date, it'll tell you when George Clooney was born and who was president, which was JFK. And the odd thing is that it's not really reasoning. It's just knowing the order in which to say things so something can be included in its prompt. Because they're really all about language as opposed to information. But I love the model you have, and I think that it's a great model of these things as information Sherpas. They are the interface between us and the entire world of data, analytics, information access, and search. And that's fantastic. So what is that, at this point, Shivani, what is Accenture, I'm sure Accenture has a current 5-year plan. But what is Accenture? What do you see as sort of Accenture and language models and AI in general? A little bit beyond 5 years from now.
Beyond 5 years from now, wow! Like that's like a whole new future out there.
It's forever.
Exactly right. Given where we are, I think first and foremost, fundamentally, what we've been talking about. Again, irrespective of whether it's a startup company, enterprise, what we are finding is, and this, I'm a tech geek at heart, just the base level of technology know-how. Just think about it, when COVID hit, every company overnight became a digital company. Similarly, now with Gen AI, every company needs to have what we call their digital core ready. And when we talk about digital core, it's not just your IT infrastructure and cloud and, it's also security. It's also where you're going to get your data and AI from, right? All those elements are elements of your digital core. Having that ready not only for your company and for your organization, but then also fundamentally for you. So there are all of these tasks and roles and jobs that are going to need Gen AI as a co-pilot, which means everybody's what we call technology quotient, or TQ, needs to be elevated to be able to have that kind of a conversation and to govern and use generative AI. So I think overall when I look 5 years out is way too far out, but at least if I were to look over the next 12 to 18 months, what we do, how we do business, all of that is going to fundamentally change. And in order to be ready for that, we need our digital core personally ready, as well as the digital core of our organizations ready.
No, I hear you. I hear you. Oddly enough, the reason why I'm not physically there right now is because we're running a workshop right now on AI, safety, and harm. And one of the things that came up, actually, it's my favorite analogy, is that AI is the new electricity. But we have to remember what electricity was. The electricity used to kill people all the time. I mean, it just did. I mean, the Chicago Expo, Westinghouse ran wires and they burst into flame and 16 people died. And we pushed on. But it used to be, in the early days of electricity, companies would have VPs of electricity. And there would be the people who it would be somebody who was making sure that, for their factory, they knew how to roll out electricity. And that job lasted for a while, and then the technology became commoditized. And I'm just wondering, how long is that arc going to be? Because I'm pretty sure that, I mean, I'm a big proponent of prompt engineering as a job right now, but I think the half-life on that is maybe 2 years, because we'll learn how to automate it, and it will come as part of the package. And I'm just wondering, when is the day when we have the same attitude towards complex AI systems as we have to our automated braking systems in our cars? I have no idea how my brakes work. I mean, I have no idea. I have a vague sense. I use them, but I don't need to know, because somebody else did and somebody else did a good job of it. And I'm just wondering, do you see a time when AI is genuinely like electricity? It's something we take for granted. And there are a couple things we've got to worry about now and again, but for the most part, it's something that's in the background that we can ignore. I mean, do you see a future that's like that?
I do, however, there are a few things that we need in place before we have that. One is the digital core that I talked about. Second, very closely behind it, are the ethics, the safety, the trust. How are we going to use generative AI, and how do we make sure that we have the right ethical governance, all of those. It's so much in the early stages right now that is extremely important before we can actually commercialize and productize generative AI into our systems and into mainstream society yet.
Can you give us a sense of what Accenture is doing with regard to responsible AI, safe AI?
Yes, so when you mentioned earlier the VP of electricity, well, we have a head of responsible AI globally now at Accenture, right? But joking aside, this is an area that is emerging. There is a lot behind that, a lot more when we are not only working with leading universities, we're also working with government agencies, we're also working with the tech agencies in order to form a consortium, in order to start to build out the governance and the structures out for Gen AI. More to come on that.
And I have to ask it. Elizabeth, what do you think about what we need to do for ethical AI?
Mitigating biases in AI involves diverse and inclusive development teams, rigorous testing, ongoing monitoring for biases, and ensuring transparency in AI decision-making processes.
It's funny. Of course, this one stopped being trained 2 years ago, so there are a whole bunch of modern problems that she doesn't know about. So bias is her favorite thing. Shane, when you're looking at moving forward with AI, I mean, what's your take on sort of the ethical issues, the safety issues? Because you're in the middle. I mean, you're in the middle of an industry that is that's focused on first do no harm. Sort of what's your stance and what kind of steps are you taking?
I guess first I'd say we have a regulatory structure in place in the US that governs a lot of what we already do. And so anything that's considered a medical device, which includes software as a medical device or drugs that get developed, are all governed under FDA rules, which have a lot of protections in place for clinical impact, nonconformities, monitoring, design controls, et cetera. A lot of the privacy concerns get governed under HIPAA. And so anything we do, we're first and foremost ensuring that whatever we're doing in AI also complies with any of the regulations that we're under. I think almost to the comments I made earlier around natural language as an interface to knowledge systems, those are the type of things where you can make calculated risks, where you can enable a natural language interface, but as long as you're governing and controlling the underlying knowledge base and the underlying knowledge systems, you get some of the benefits of AI while having some control over the risks. I'd say, all of the things that go into the development of a new test, a new assay, a new algorithm that gets deployed, you look at things like the underlying, to Elizabeth's point, the bias of the underlying data set, the sampling of the data set, good scientific procedures in the algorithm development. And a lot of what we're going to do is, a lot of what we are doing is governed under medical device development regulations, features that come out that can help physicians and operators with more efficiency with large language models. Those are limited to the areas that aren't as governed, and therefore you need to, we want to take advantage of those and provide efficiency and capabilities, but they're not at the most central parts of patient diagnostics or prognostic decision making. I do believe that changes over. I do believe that changes over time. I think to your 5-year question kind of made me chuckle. None of us would be thinking half of what we're thinking today if it was 5 years ago. As I think of this crowd and startup operators or people that are thinking about starting new companies, the one thing that you can say almost for certain is none of us know, none of the panelists, none of you know what this is going to look like, the applications of it or the modalities of it 5 years from now. And so you need to have literacy, and you need to be challenging your investment theses on, like, how could I get disrupted by AI? Do I have a moat? Is my company going to be valid in 2 years from now if AI makes really step-level improvements? And you need to make sure that you're doing the things that help protect against those and instituting the right training and AI literacy in your organizations.
That's interesting. Again, I have to ask you, Elizabeth, what do you think AI is going to be like in 5 years?
AI has the potential to make the world a better place by improving efficiency, solving complex problems, and advancing various fields such as healthcare and transportation.
Sally, what do you think AI is going to be like in 5 years? She didn't misheard her name. Sally. Sally. She's going to pass on it. Sorry. Luke, are we taking questions from the audience?
Yes, I'm sure there's some good questions from this crowd.
Let's
so
have
raise your
some
hand.
questions.
So we were talking about security just a little while ago, and I think part of the reason why things are really nebulous is, as you just mentioned, we don't know what AI is going to look like 5, 10 years from now, and we wouldn't even know what generative AI would have looked like until ChatGPT released, to the public back in November. And I think a lot of people, myself included, really like to think in terms of concrete examples, right? There's a lot of nebulous things, and we agree before things can really take off, we need regulations in place. But how can we do that if we can't even imagine what AI will look like or what the problems it'll bring, right? Because you talk about disruptions, we're already seeing, deep fake videos online that's using AI that are fairly convincing, and we can imagine right now what types of disruptions can be brought with the technology available right now, let alone in 5 years from now. So just like, hindsight 2020, if you could go back in time and say, hey, there's this new thing, it's called social media, it's Facebook, et cetera, what would you, here are some regulations that we can put in place right now. How can we make regulations when, we can't really predict it, but if you could, and just, off the top of your head, what kind of regulations would you propose to, our senators right now?
I'm going to give this to the panelists. I have opinions here, but I'm going to give this to the panelists first.
It's challenging. Most of the patients that come to Tempus are stage 3 or stage 4 cancer patients. They come to our lab by, the way that they end up with us is every 3 weeks you have your meeting with your oncologist, and you were on one treatment, you were stage 1 or stage 2, you show up to an appointment and they say, hey, bad news, what we were trying wasn't working before. There's this company, Tempus, that if we send a sample of your tumor to them, they have techniques to help you use data and artificial intelligence to find what the next possible treatment is. And we want to be as safe as possible, but I've had friends and family go through that process, even to our labs. I would hope that we can find the right balance of a regulatory structure that allows for, like FDA has something called breakthrough status, where despite it being like an early invention or an early discovery, they have mechanisms to fast track through, and there's certainly use cases that I think warrant that. But at the same time, the deep fakes, I think astroturfing, utilizing social media, unleashing AIs and LLMs in social media can definitely influence the population and can cause risk. And I think we need smart approaches to combat it. But at the same time, a lot of the high value use cases, I just want to find ways that we can continue to accelerate breakthroughs, because it's really important to humanity. I'm not a regulator, so I won't weigh in on what that looks like, but I hope we can find a balance between both of those.
Yeah, from my standpoint, I think the biggest thing is continuing to have that human element to the Gen AI, right? When there's a great example of when Uber had started to build out autonomous cars, the whole concept of tagging, right? So it had tagged a human, a car, all the objects, a bicycle. However, that 100% autonomous Uber vehicle landed up killing a lady with a bicycle because they had forgotten to teach the model. It wasn't a lady riding the bicycle, it was a lady crossing the road with the bicycle next to her. And the model could not understand what that is, whether it's a threat or it's a human being or what it is, right? So first and foremost, keeping that human element alive while you are training the models. That's the first piece. And then the second piece is, it's not just about creating the foundational models or creating or building out, having the prompt engineers and creating an LLM. It's about training it. It's about constantly evolving it and tweaking it. That's where the ethical piece comes in, the regulation piece comes in. The more we continue to do that as humans, so the first and second point are very much correlated, the better that we can get, right? Because otherwise, of course, there will continue to be, the regulations and the government involvement and, all of that piece. But at the end of the day, at the heart of it, it is about humans using it as a co-pilot versus 100% autonomy, and then making sure that we are constantly refining those models.
And then, Kris, to close the panel, why don't you share your answer with us as well?
I think that we don't have to predict the ill effects of our technologies. We can see them already. Online addiction, numerous types of dark patterns that lead you into making decisions you don't want to make, rise in depression of young women on social, the judicial systems that are used to make decisions about parole that are biased and inherently racist, job recommendation systems that are literally sexist and racist. These all exist. You can point at particular models, particular systems, and we don't seem to do anything about them because, in many ways, because we see them as being somehow integrated into our decision making, that we don't accept that they actually influence our decision making tremendously. And so there's a wealth of regulation that is absolutely needed. But understand, I'm saying that from the point of view of, I've worked in AI all my life. I love AI. I think AI has the potential to change everything about us, to make the world infinitely better. But we have to make sure it doesn't cause harm and it's safe. And there are all sorts of things we could do and do today. And I've never been able to understand quite why we don't do it.
Everyone, round of applause for our AI versus IQ speakers. So thank you to Kris and Shane and Shivani and to Elizabeth and sometimes Sally. Very insightful, interesting conversation in a very creative, different format. We loved it today. So we're going to take another short break, maybe like a 7 or 8 minute break or so. We'll start back up here again shortly before 4:25 for Innovators Combating Climate Change.
Bye-bye, everybody.